Some cities are just remembered in ruins, right? Others, they live on in stories. But every once in a while, you find one that manages to stick around for millennia. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. We're diving into the incredible story of Anuradhapura. This was a city that was the absolute heart of a civilization, then it was lost to the jungle, and then, amazingly, it was found again. So, let's get into it. Just look at the scale of this place. It's immense. For an incredible 1,500 years, this was the capital of Sri Lanka. Think about that. It was this sprawling metropolis, a center of power, religion, and some seriously amazing engineering. To put that in perspective, this city reigned longer than ancient Rome. That's just wild. But then, you get this. Fast forward to the 19th century, and a European visitor describes this once mighty capital as, and I'm quoting here, a small, mean village in the midst of a desert. So what on earth happened? How does a city that was on top for a millennium and a half just disappear like that? That's the big question we're going to dig into. But here's the thing. Despite that massive fall, the story of Anuradhapura was far from over. Today, it's actually recognized as one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in all of Asia. And of course, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A really sacred place for pilgrims that, well, it holds all the keys to its own incredible past. Okay, so to really get how it endured all that, we have to go right back to the beginning. Let's take a look at how a pretty simple settlement managed to grow into one of the great cities of the ancient world. And what's so fascinating is just how deep the roots of this city go. The official chronicles say it was founded in the 5th century BCE, but archaeology, it tells a different story. It shows people were living here, even working with iron, way back in the 10th century BCE. So the city's foundations were being laid long, long before anyone ever called it a capital. The name itself actually tells you the whole story of its growth. It started out as Anuradhagama. It was named for a minister, Anuradha, and Gama just means village. But then, as it got bigger and became the kingdom's capital, that Gama got swapped out for Pura, which means city. It's such a simple name change, but it signals this absolutely massive transformation. All right, let's jump into its golden age, because this wasn't just about ruling for a long time. This was the period when Anuradhapura truly became the beating heart of Sinhalese civilization. I just want to pause on this number for a second. 1,500 years. Let that sink in. Dynasties were rising and falling all over the world, but for a millennium and a half, Anuradhapura was the stable, consistent center of power for the island's kingdoms. And that stability, it's the key to everything that came next. So, how'd they do it? How did they manage that kind of stability? Well, their power really rested on two main pillars. First up, they were masters of water. These people were hydraulic geniuses. They built these enormous reservoirs, or tanks, that irrigated all the land. And this wasn't just for drinking water. It was about food security, it was about supporting a huge population, and honestly, it was about projecting some serious power in a pretty dry region. And that second pillar? It was faith. Anuradhapura became the cradle of Theravada Buddhism in Sri Lanka. And wow, nothing symbolizes that faith more powerfully than this. This is the Jaya Sri Maha Bodhi. This sacred fig tree is believed to have grown from a cutting of the actual tree that the Buddha sat under when he attained enlightenment. It was planted way back in the 3rd century BCE, which makes it the oldest documented living tree in the entire world. It's a direct, living link to the city's ancient spiritual core. Just amazing. So with that kind of spiritual significance, it's no surprise that Anuradhapura became this major intellectual hub. It was home to brilliant thinkers, like the philosopher Buddhaghosa. You had these massive, monumental stupas in monasteries all over the landscape. And the scale of it all, it's just staggering. The ruins today cover more than 100 square kilometers. This was a city with some serious spiritual and intellectual weight. But as we all know, no golden age lasts forever. After 1,500 years of pretty much continuous rule, a single catastrophic event was about to bring it all crashing down. It would lead to the city literally being swallowed by the jungle it had fought to keep at bay. And this is the year it all changed, 993 CE. An invasion from the Chola dynasty in South India hits the capital, and it marks a violent, definitive end to an era. The historical records, they do not pull any punches. A chronicle called the Kula Vamsa says the city was, quote, utterly destroyed in every way. The attack was so devastating that the capital was just abandoned. The entire political heart of the island had to move somewhere else, leaving this incredible city to its fate. And so for the next 800 years or so, Anuradhapura pretty much faded from the world stage. Now, it wasn't completely forgotten. To the locals, it was always a sacred spot, and pilgrims knew the old paths through the overgrowth. But its grand monuments, its palaces, they were all just slowly being reclaimed by nature.
But then, the story takes another huge turn, this time in the modern era. Let's look at how this lost city was finally brought back into the light and saved for all of us.
The comeback really started in the late 1800s, with British archaeologists doing some surveys. But the real work kicked off after Sri Lanka's independence. A huge moment was the Preservation Plan of 1949. And that led to a really bold decision in the 50s. They decided to completely relocate the modern town to protect the ancient ruins. It was a massive effort, and it all culminated in the city becoming a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982.
And this leads to the really clever solution they have today. There are basically two Anuradhapuras now. You have the sacred city, that's the huge archaeological park where all the ancient ruins are preserved for pilgrims and tourists. And then you have the new town, which is a totally separate, modern city built to house the government offices and the local population. This separation is what allows the past to really breathe.
So all of this leaves us with a pretty big question, right? What does it really take for a city to endure? Because the story of Anuradhapura shows us that it isn't just about stone and mortar. It managed to endure through invasion, through abandonment, because its identity was preserved in faith and in memory. It didn't just survive as a place. It survived as an idea. And that idea was powerful enough to be reborn centuries later.